Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between the Gibson USA SG Standard 61 and the Gibson Custom 1961 Les Paul Standard. It's an SG. Now, I always start out these comparison videos the same way, so, well, let's keep that up. YouTube videos are fantastic. They allow you to see the guitar that maybe you're looking to buy in action. You can hear it, you get a little bit of a different perspective on things, but it's with someone else's hands. Someone else's amp choice, amp setting choice, and, you know, they're choosing to play what they kind of want to play. So, please don't let a goofball like me tell you what to buy. Best thing to do if you are looking to purchase a specific guitar, if you have the ability to do so, go to the store and play it. Go to the store, play that guitar, and 3 other guitars that are cheaper than that one, and 3 other guitars that are more expensive. That's the best way to find out if that guitar is going to work for you. So please don't buy a guitar just because you think, well, it's not going to be me. Look at the shirt that I'm wearing. But don't buy a guitar just because some person plays it and it sounds good in their hands. Buy it because you know that it's going to work for you. But I do have 5 sound samples for you today with 5 different amps and 5 different tunings. I try to do a little bit of different playing there for you just so you can kind of get a little bit more, perspective on things. But it's this channel, so the last one is definitely a full-on metal sound sample. right, so there you go. There are the 5 different sound samples in this comparison between the Gibson USA and the Gibson Custom. It is at this point in the video where I like to go over kind of the spec differences and stuff like that. I'm going to kind of do that quickly because I did do a video that's more in depth on the differences. It's called What's the Difference Between Both of These Guitars. I'll leave a link for it in the description down below. So if you want more in-depth information, that's the place to go. But we're going to do that, and then I'll talk about, you know, my thoughts and my feelings on both of these guitars. So both guitars are a thin carved mahogany body. The Gibson USA is 2 pieces of mahogany, whereas the Gibson Custom is 1 piece of mahogany. Both have slim taper mahogany necks with bound rosewood fretboards. The binding on the Gibson Custom is just a little bit thinner, and that just allows them to roll the fretboard a little more. The neck on the Gibson Custom is millimeters thicker as well than the Gibson USA. On the front of the headstock is where you're going to find the inlaid Gibson logo and the inlaid holly, crown, thistle. Everyone calls it something different. And then from there, you're going to find, normally, on the Gibson USA, you would just find a blank truss rod cover. I'm a nerd, and I spent like $30 or $40 and ordered this to go onto the Gibson USA. On the Gibson Custom, you will note that it has a Les Paul truss rod cover. That's because when this was released, it was a Les Paul standard. On the back of the headstock on the Gibson USA, you're going to find the Clouson style Gibson Vintage Deluxe tuners. They are modern sizing rather than vintage sizing. So that means if you wanted to swap out the tuners for Grovers or any other modern locking tuner, it's very easy to do so. You wouldn't have to remount the holes to make them wider for them to fit through. You'd more than likely just have to drill different pilot holes in the back of the headstock just so you can, you know, screw your Grovers or whatever into the back of the headstock. On the back of the Custom is where you will find the double ring Clouson Vintage Deluxe tuners. These are premium tuner. They're also vintage sizings. That means if you wanted to swap out tuners for a modern size tuner like locking Grovers or whatever, you would have to ream out the holes to make them larger to fit the tuners through. Pickup wise, we have the 61R and 61T in the Gibson USA, which are Alnico 5 pickups. Whereas the Gibson Custom, we have Alnico 3 custom buckers. Both pickups are unpotted. Both guitars also have CTS audio taper potentiometers. They're both hand soldered. The Gibson USA has orange drop capacitors versus the Black Beauties, not Bumblebee, Black Beauty capacitors that are on the 1961 VOS. There's a difference in pricing here. This is one of the big reasons why there's a difference in pricing. Orange drop capacitors, generally Canadian, cost you $6 per capacitor. The Black Beauties, they're usually, if you know a guy, maybe $60 to $80, but I've seen them from $100 to $300 for the capacitors. People are crazy, yeah, they pay for that. But the big thing here is most guitar players do not use the capacitors that are in their guitar. The capacitors are not really used unless you dial back your tone controls. If you're not doing that, it's not properly in the signal path. Both guitars have the Tune-O-Matic with the stop bar. They are both ABR1s. The Gibson USA has a metal doweling system that connects it to the body, whereas the ABR1 on the Custom is drilled directly into the body. And if you've noticed that the coloring here is different, that's because it's different. This is a heck of a lot lighter than the very deep and rich aniline dye that is used to create the Gibson Custom Shop. And like I said, I did do a video showing more in depth of the differences here, but it goes to show that the pickguard is different and the carving is just a little more aggressive on the Gibson Custom Shop. Very quickly, let's put on our tinfoil hats here, because I do want to make mention of one thing. The Gibson USA uses tight bond glue, and more glue than what's used in the custom because, well, we're looking at a two-piece mahogany body rather than a single piece of lightweight mahogany. The tight bond glue leaves behind a film, but the Gibson Custom Shop uses hot hide glue. Now, again, I'm saying put on your tinfoil hat because I don't know that this is the case. However, when I was younger, I heard old guys in a music store that had a sandwich shop in it always talking about different things. The neck should never be completely straight. You're going to actually get fret buzz around the first and second fret. You should have an ever so slight bow in it. When you tune up to pitch, never down to pitch. If you tune down to pitch, the moment you start bending, well, that's going to create some slack around the post to the nut, and your guitar is going to start to go flat. And the other thing that I heard, well, it was other ones, but the other big thing that I heard that kind of got caught in my mind was they don't make guitars like they used to. Old Gibsons were made completely different. They used to drill things directly into the body. This and that was different. One of the things they said, even the glue they used to use hot hide glue, or I thought I heard Hyatt glue. And I thought, these people are crazy. They're talking about glues. But one of the things that they said was it made the guitars sound louder, and it made everything ring out like it was a single piece. So I tried not to ever play VOS guitars because, well, look at the price of them. They're crazy. And then I finally did try, and the first thing I absolutely noticed was they're acoustically louder, and the freaking things ring out like a single piece of wood. So, old guys, I respect you. You taught me a lot when you eating your sandwiches in the store. But that's kind of what I'm going with. And you know what? That I've heard a lot about that online. Gibson kind of touts that, but they kind of have to because they're trying to sell, or upsell their guitars. So again, we're just going to say that's tinfoil hat, but, go try them for yourself. All right, now that we've taken off our tinfoil hats, this portion of the video I like to do, talk about how my personal experiences with both of these guitars, like my thoughts on it, and how I feel when I'm playing these guitars. The good thing when I'm comparing two SGs is I don't have to put it on my lap and go, this is how this guitar sits in your lap. This is how this guitar sits in your lap. That kind of thing. This is an SG. If you have an SG that's like this, that has a tune-o-matic and a stop bar, the guitar was not designed for a tune-o-matic and a stop bar. Technically, in 1961, they did not sell any that had a tune-o-matic and stop bar, except for like a couple of custom orders. Allegedly. So, if you are playing a SG that has a stop bar in it, a tune-o-matic with a stop bar, wear a leather strap. It's going to have neck dive. They lightened the body because people complained at Les Pauls were heavier and they were thicker. So they lightened the body. They added a tailpiece to it, so that kind of balanced the weight. But without that, it just kind of goes. So wear a leather strap. So let's focus really quickly on the Gibson USA. I've owned this guitar for about 3-4 years now. Up until the point that I bought my USA with the Maestro Vibrola, this was my favorite SG that I owned. This guitar SGs have that little bit of pluckiness from here to here. It's not this weird thing that, makes it hard to play the guitar. It's just something that it's a little crisper when you're playing it, and you can dig in a little more. So this guitar had the best example of it before I bought the Maestro Vibrola one. SGs have phenomenal reachability for the higher frets. So if you're playing leads, if you're not standing up with a nylon strap, then playing your leads and going up to the 22nd fret is an absolute breeze. Because of the thinner and lighter body, when you're playing this guitar for rhythm or strumming, any of that kind of stuff, it kind of has a little bit of bite to it. There's not all of the low end that you inherently get with a Les Paul that has that thicker body with it, even though I love that low end that comes through. This is a little bit thinner sounding, and if you look at things, it's all mid and upper range, which is what most people say is exactly what you need in a mix for guitar. The Vintage Deluxe tuners are fantastic. Again, I always have tuned up to pitch. From there, I've always tugged on my strings. That's another thing the old guys would talk about at the music store. I would tug on my strings and then tune back up to pitch. Do that like 2 or 3 times because I'm always worried about starting to bend and having things go flat. So with these tuners, some people, for some reason, because they're not Grover, they think that these aren't very good, and for some reason they believe that this is why their guitar goes out of tune, rather than the fact that they're tuning down to pitch. And the 2-piece body, I just always thought they always had a 2-piece body. They are very, very good at hiding that seam on some of the Les Pauls, but very hard to hide it on like an SG like this. So I always thought it was normal to have a 2-piece mahogany body until I found, you know, that's not normally what they do with customs. Now let's take a look at the Gibson Custom. So the Gibson Custom is a single piece of mahogany, which is very cool. Red aniline dye that is used. I did confirm that because, you know, I read the description. It was actually listed in there. But it's a very deep and rich color. When you compare it from this to the Gibson USA, this is like almost freaking 3D when you're looking at it. And because of that, the carving that you see here, which is very similar. It's a little more aggressive than the USA, but it's you can notice it a little more because of the deep and rich color. Because the Gibson USA is lighter, the carving kind of disappears and kind of blends into things, whereas with the aniline dye, it's very noticeable. And don't worry, yes, this still does have all the pluckiness. We still have the same body carve, except it's a little more aggressive. Comes to a bit more of a point here, a thinner point here. But you still have all of the reachability, still have all the pluckiness. So playing leads on this are absolutely fantastic. You can really dig in with an SG, especially when it's down-tuned. For some reason, when I think of fat, dirty, deep, high gain guitars, it just seems that you can get a little dirtier with an SG. And because of the combination of the glues used, I know, tinfoil hat, and the fact that the ABR1 is drilled directly into the body, when you're playing this, it feels a heck of a lot more crisp, and you feel a little more in your body because the VOS finish, the Vintage Original Sheen, is a little lighter than the High Gloss USA. So that means when you're playing it, you get a little more resonance that comes through. So resonance being the low end, but you don't lose all of that presence that, you know, like the mid-range, high, upper mid-range that you tend to do. If you were to get this with like a satin nitro finish, you'd feel a lot more of the low end, but you would start to lose, again, this is in your body, what you feel, you would start to lose some of that upper mid-range that you feel with this type of finish or a high gloss finish. And again, the tuners here are Kluson Vintage Deluxe Vintage Size Tuning. These are a premium tuner. In Canada, they're harder to get. It's got the 2 rings because they started that in 1960 and carried it over to 61. And I have a 64 VOS coming, which is the Maestro Vibrola one, which is not a Les Paul. That also has the double ring Klusons. I know that some people I think frustrated is the right word. Are a little confused that the 61 doesn't come with Grovers, whereas the USA Les Paul Standard 60s comes with Grovers. But Gibson does this weird thing with some of their guitars, especially if they have two models, like the 50s and the 60s. So what they'll do is they'll kind of put like a typical upgrade that might have been done during that era, because Grovers weren't typically found on Gibsons until like the 70s, I believe. But it was a typical upgrade to kind of remount the holes and install them in the headstock. With the Kluson Vintage Deluxe tuners, same thing, tune up to pitch, never tune down to pitch. It's just going to start to go flat. Tug on your strings. These tend to stay in tune a lot more. Like I get, typically if I do that 3 times and I'm recording, I don't have to touch my guitar for like the whole time that I'm recording. This particular one, or all of the Kluson Vintage Deluxe, I don't know what it is. Could be the combination that it's a nylon nut rather than a Graphtec nut. Although some people don't like the nylon nuts as well. But I can tune this and typically put it down for a day or two and keep recording with it for multiple days, and I don't have to touch the tuners unless I'm changing tuning. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. This freaking thing rings out like it's a single piece of wood, even though it has 3 species of wood going on here. It still kind of blows my mind. I can't wait to get over that kind of hump of, okay, I've owned this for a while. It's just the norm. But hands down, this is the best SG that I have ever played. I can't wait for my 1964 VOS to come in, because once I got the Maestro Vibrola 61 standard, the USA one, that just completely changed my mind. So I can't wait to get that one to see if that does the same thing as well. So that's generally my thoughts. The Gibson USA is tried and true, for me at least. And the Gibson Custom is still blowing my freaking mind. And I don't know if that is ever going to... I'm sure it will. But it's really a great choice to own either one of these, or even the Epiphone version. If the Epiphone version works for you, and you don't feel you need the USA or the Custom, that's awesome. That's really why you go and play the guitars and make sure that's the right guitar for you. But again, I do want to reiterate here, because people love those little gotcha moments, I guess, on the internet. You get a cookie somewhere. But even though these are 61s, standard 61s, there wasn't really a 61 with a stop bar. It had the sideways vibrola, and then eventually they released the ebony block vibrola, which I believe was 62, and then somewhere 63, 64 was kind of where the Maestro vibrola became a lot more prevalent in it. At 64, it was not considered a Les Paul, because Les Paul had, was going through a divorce, and that was it. Don't use my name, because I don't want my ex-wife getting all my money for my name. But the sideways vibrola doesn't really sell well, which is another reason why you don't typically see the 1952 Les Paul released a lot, because that bridge really didn't work all that well. There was a lot of hindrances with it. So if they want to sell things properly, make it a 61, put a stop bar on it with a two-pneumatic. And you know what? Fantastic guitar. Best SGs I've ever played. Even though it's still a Les Paul. And I'll fight you to the death, because I bought it, and it says Les Paul on it. So we're going to go with that. Thanks for watching. Isn't my shirt stupid?